Look, I know it's not okay to say it. I know this. But are we allowed to write it down?
What I do is if I really need to get it out, I write it down.
I have recently been writing a story around a black character and came across a moral conundrum. So first off, I know not every black person uses the N-word, but the people I hang out with, including the person I am basing this character on, do. The story is based on true events in my life, but inherently is a fictional story. Now, since I am a white man with no N-word pass, is it okay for me to use this word in my mostly fictional story? If I'm not able to, then why does Quentin Tarantino get to do it? Like, can we pull up his Ancestry.com? Did Samuel Jackson give him the pass? Quentin doesn't even use the shortened version I was thinking about using. Most of the time, it is the full government name. Now, not only does he write down the government name in his scripts, but he writes it down for himself to say on camera.
It's the dead in my garage.
Like, I didn't even know that was allowed. In the same scene, there isn't really a reason for him to drop that bomb that many times, other than to show how berate the character is with the situation, and that he feels entitled to say whatever he wants. Now replace the government N-word with any other word, and this scene hits the same beats. Maybe the scene wouldn't have been nearly as memorable, but should we be chalking up a scene's memorability to a racial slur? If one was to denounce Quentin as a racist for using the N-word, this scene would be good evidence. But how does this allegation hold up, considering that the best characters he creates are usually portrayed by black people?
I don't understand why they can't look at his work and realize that every character he's ever given me has pretty much been the smartest character in the film.
Now, there's no denying that Quentin Tarantino has made racist characters in his story, but I wouldn't say he inherently has made a racist story. Now, what if a story was trying to be racist to prove a point? Would the story even have any merit in being made by a white person in the first place? I feel like this is a little more of a nuanced situation, a writer being racist through their story to serve the narrative. The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn is a great example of a story being racist to satirize racism. Set in Missouri during the 1830s, probably one of the most racist time periods in America, it has become one of the most banned books in the country. Mark Twain wrote this during the Reconstruction era after slavery, where
all men are created equal. Go get me a sandwich, nigger, or I'll kill you.
This is where the satire is at its peak, dealing with many heavy and important conversations surrounding racism that many black Americans still suffered from after the abolition of slavery. But many people fail to engage with these parts of the book and instead focus on the many times Mark Twain dropped the N-word, rather than looking into why he used it. Now, one could ask why such a racist story would ever need to be made. Would the world be better off not having the Adventure of Huckleberry Finn at all? Well, don't forget that the story only reflects America's dark history, and by banning the Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, we lose that time capsule that gives us an in-depth look into how America treated black men post-Civil War, and gives context to young white Americans who otherwise wouldn't have a reason to know why the N-word is so taboo. I believe that if the same story of Huckleberry Finn was written by a black person in 1885, it would have been much harder to achieve a publishing deal, let alone gain notoriety on said story. However, looking at the Adventure of Huckleberry Finn from a modern perspective, is it even our place to talk about oppression for black people? Should a story like Huckleberry Finn be made if it's not from the mind of a black person?
One question is, if they're coming from the place, by asking that question, that I'm coming from a racist place, all right, well, then that's the question. Okay, that's where they're coming from, all right?
Right.
If that's not the case, then it's simply about me being a writer.
Right.
All right, and then they cannot say, I can't write another character. They can't say, I can't write black characters, I can't live my black characters, I can't be my black characters, I can't be my Filipino characters.
Right.
I can
You
be
can't
my
write
characters.
women in that case.
Right.
Exactly.
I seem to have made a full circle while not really gaining closure on the premise of this video. Are we allowed to write it down? Well, from the perspective of Quentin Tarantino, it seems that as long as it is in service of a story, then it's fine. But when looking at Tarantino's use of the word, we also need to consider the differences in using the word to reflect the time period rather than using it for shock value or just trying to make a scene more intense when it's not totally called for. However, making a story with racist intent to prove a point whether it's satirizing racism or just exposing the prejudice towards the targeted minority, that's where things become a little more dicey. From a white person's perspective, it's not really our place to talk about racism or oppressed minorities in general. This is because these aren't really problems that white people have to deal with throughout their lives. Even with me making this video, I feel like I have been walking a very fine line of not sounding like a privileged white person while also talking about a problem that doesn't really concern me. I don't really like not having closure on my videos, but I feel like I don't have the right to provide closure on this topic. So this is where I open up discussion. What do you think? Is it okay for white people to talk about oppression and racism, even if they haven't dealt with it firsthand? Or should we leave it up to the oppressed to write stories from their own perspectives and experiences? Finally, is it okay to use the N-word in our stories without any racist intent, but instead using it because that's what fits the character? Or should we just leave it up to Tyler Perry?